From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Welcome to this Monday edition of Washington Watch. Thanks for tuning in and making us part of your day. Well, coming up, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will be in D.C. tomorrow to meet with senators. He will attend an all-senators meeting hosted by Senators Schumer and McConnell. He will also meet with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Ukraine is just a stepping stone for Russia, a way to act like that old empire that died in 1989 and to challenge the lead of freedom wherever the Russia Tsar likes. Putin must lose.
That was President Zelensky earlier today at the National Defense University in D.C. The key to resolving the legislative impasse over additional funding to Ukraine is, quite frankly, not personal pleas from the Ukrainian president, but practical policy steps by President Joe Biden to secure the U.S. southern border.
When it comes to keeping America safe, border security is not a sideshow. It's ground zero. Senate Republicans have no more spare time to explain this basic reality. We cannot convince anyone who doesn't want to acknowledge the glaring facts on the ground. The Senate has to act.
That was Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell earlier today. We'll get more on this topic in just a moment from Kansas Senator Roger Marshall. Also on the congressional agenda this week, the House is scheduled to vote on proceeding with the impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden. Is the mounting evidence, including the latest indictment of Hunter Biden, changing the mind of Republicans who were reluctant to approve the inquiry? We'll talk with North Carolina Congressman Dr. Greg Murphy, a House Ways and Means Committee member. Few congressional hearings have ignited outrage like the one the House Education and Workforce Committee held on anti-Semitism last week. Now, it wasn't the topic that was so explosive as the revealing statements made by the presidents of Harvard, the University of Pennsylvania, and MIT.
We embrace a commitment to free expression, even of views that are objectionable, offensive, hateful.
Really, she should have said some views, some expression. That was Harvard President Claudine Gay last week before the House committee. The president of Penn resigned over the weekend, and pressure is building on the others. The question that we're going to look at today is, did the war in Gaza spark this unprecedented wave of anti-Semitism on college campuses here in the U.S., or did it expose it? Ira Stoll, founder and editor of The Future of Capitalism, joins us for that conversation. Also, on the congressional to-do list this week, Congress is trying to finalize the National Defense Authorization Act, but several high hurdles are standing in the way. The current language removes most of the provisions added by the House back in July to restore the status quo to the military when it comes to the left's radical social agenda. A lot of these social policies were pushed unilaterally by the Biden administration. Well, the subtractions include the provision that would get taxpayers out of facilitating abortions in the military. But what is fostering the strongest opposition to the bill is a provision that extends the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, which has allowed the government to spy literally on millions of Americans. So what is FISA for? How has it been misused, and can it be fixed? Ken Klukowski, former senior counsel in the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, former White House attorney, and Breitbart News senior legal contributor, will join us to explore those questions and more. Our word for today comes from 1 John 1. This is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. And we must realize and acknowledge that man's default position is actually darkness, as John actually writes in his gospel account over in John chapter 3, verse 19. And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light. But we can come out of the darkness and into the light by confessing our sins, as John makes clear in 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That is how we dwell in the light. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible. Negotiations continue in the Senate for an agreement that provides aid to Ukraine in addition to adding security restrictions to deal with the Biden administration's wide-open southern border. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is scheduled to address senators in Washington tomorrow in a plea for additional aid. But with the Christmas recess scheduled to begin on Friday and Democrats refusing to budge on the border, could Senate negotiations run out of time? Joining me now to discuss this and more, Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Senate Budget Committee and the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Senator Marshall, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Tony, it's great to see you. We've got some challenges up here in D.C.
And the clock is ticking. Are we going to make it?
Well, I don't think so. I think that Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden have no intention of securing our border. That's what their actions would show me. With some very simple policy changes, they could slow down this pouring across the border. Policy changes alone would probably turn around 3/4 of the people we're seeing cross our border illegally. Joe Biden could have done that yesterday, but he's not going to crater at this point in time. He's not going to give in because he's afraid of his immigration policies. He's afraid of those people that support immigration. But to me, this is a national security issue, and it really comes down to securing the border. We're not going to even talk about Ukraine, funding for Ukraine, until we secure our own border. It's that simple.
So tomorrow there's going to be a meeting with all of the senators and President Zelensky. Was this scheduled, or is this kind of a last-minute plea? Did the Biden administration tell him he needed to come to Washington to make a plea, a pitch for this money?
Well, he's being invited here by Joe Biden to come do the president's bidding. He was supposed to meet with us last week via Zoom, and that went down. I think that he knew he was going to get some tough questions from us, but we don't need another preaching message. There's everything that can be said about Ukraine has been said. Not everybody said it, but everything has been said. Look, I feel for the people of Ukraine, but I think that that's a separate topic. I'm happy to have that debate, the vote on that, but the president is wrong to put funding for Israel, funding for Ukraine, and securing the border in one package. And I just don't see us funding Ukraine until we secure our own border. It's the border, it's the border, it's the border, and the president just refuses to acknowledge that. I don't see myself even going to this meeting tomorrow. I think going to this meeting tomorrow is disrespectful to the hundreds of thousands of American families who've lost their children, their brothers, their sisters to fentanyl poisoning. Until we secure our own border, until we get our own house in order, I'm not willing to negotiate on further Ukraine funding.
You mentioned how this has all been lumped together with the funding for Israel. I think it was 39 days ago, the House sent over a funding mechanism for Israel for the roughly $14 billion in military aid to them. But that has gone nowhere in the Senate. Nothing's been done with it.
Right, Tony. So we brought that bill to the Senate floor now 4 times. We've given the Democrat senators 4 times to pass that bill, and they voted it down every time. And again, I think that's because in reality, they are pro-Palestine, they are pro-Iran, they are pro everything that's not American, right? They become globalists for all practical purposes. You cannot be pro-Israel and pro-Iran. So they've shot it down 4 times, and I bet we're going to give them another chance this week to vote on it as well.
So, Senator, I want to turn a little more closely to the border, which is intertwined with Ukraine funding, and rightfully so, because how can we be interested in helping another country secure its national security, and we're not taking care of our own? This has reached a new level as we've set new records of people coming across this border. I mean, is there any end in sight?
There's not. And Tony, I'm reminding you of the scripture here that, don't try to take the splinter out of someone else's eye until you fix the log in your own eye. And it's the immigration situation, the illegal crossing is actually getting worse. 10,000 people a day, 12,000 people a day, to the tune of 10 million illegal crossings under Joe Biden. And that includes 1.7 million gotaways, people we have no idea where they are. FBI Director Wray was on Capitol Hill just last week warning us that all the warning lights are all blinking red at this time. He's never seen every category all blinking red for fear that something could happen right now. So I do think that this has reached a critical moment, a critical mass, if you will. And that's why we put this as the top priority for Republicans right now, is to secure our border.
So just to be clear, Senator Marshall, no movement that we're seeing from the Biden administration or from Democrats being willing to accept reasonable steps to ensure that our southern border is secure so that we don't have terrorists coming across our border trying to do what happened in Israel on October the 7th happen here?
Just the opposite. Actually, if you listen to Joe Biden closely, what he wants to do is put into place processes that's going to promote more people crossing the border illegally. He wants more asylum judges. He wants it easier to claim asylum. He wants more parole. He's already paroled 1.5 million people into our nation already. So he actually wants to have more people crossing the border illegally. I don't see any movement. I just don't think that this is going to get done. And this is probably a once in a generation opportunity. If Joe Biden really wants this funding for Ukraine, then he's going to have to give us border security. And he seems unwilling to do that.
I will say that I see a resoluteness among Republican senators that across the board, I know there's always there's a group of you that are very staunch in fighting for family issues, fighting for the Constitution, but others will kind of blow with the wind. But it appears that the Republicans are standing firm as a bloc in the Senate.
I do think we are. So all 49 of us voted this down last week. Leader McConnell is leading the charge on this. He said it every day. I believe he said every day that no Ukraine funding until we secure the border, that securing the border is the priority. It's the border, it's the border.
Final question for you, Senator Roger Marshall. What should we be anticipating between now and Thursday?
I think a lot of talk, a lot of rhetoric. I just don't see anything moving up here right now. Maybe we'll get the NDAA done, but I just don't see any movement here. I don't think the real negotiation on the border in Ukraine starts until we go home, but we'll see.
All right, Senator Roger Marshall, if I don't see you before, Merry Christmas. Always great to see you and appreciate your leadership on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Tony. Merry Christmas to you, your family, and to all your listeners. Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas. All right, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of homework in this edition of Washington Watch. So go ahead, and if you don't already have the Capitol switchboard number on your speed dial or on your contact list on your phone, here it is, 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121, or you can go to TonyPerkins.com under the resources for today's program. We've got some links there for you as well that you can contact your senators. But you need to contact your senators and tell them to hold firm. No border security. If we can't secure our own country, how can we help someone else secure theirs? And so I think the Republicans are on the right track. Of course, in the Senate, they're being spurred on by House Republicans who are resolute on this. And of course, there's going to be other action items coming up as well. Next, we talk about the vote coming up on the inquiry of impeachment. That's next. Don't go away. More Washington Watch ahead.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Merry Christmas. Welcome back to Washington Watch, the website, TonyPerkins.com. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday. Well, tomorrow, the House Rules Committee has a markup scheduled on a resolution to formalize the impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden. Now, to be clear, this is to approve the inquiry, not impeachment. This is so they can start just doing the investigation surrounding a possible impeachment. Now, ongoing investigations by the House Judiciary Committee, Ways and Means, and Oversight and Accountability Committee have shown the sources of foreign money received by the Biden family and continue to look into just how compromised President Biden might be by his involvement in his family's foreign business dealings. Now, again, this is just an impeachment inquiry, but it could be momentum building for a formal vote on impeachment. I don't know. Could it be? Joining us to discuss this is Congressman Greg Murphy. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and the House Committee on Administration. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina. Dr. Murphy, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, Tony. Good afternoon. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing good. Did you have a good weekend?
I did. I hope you did too.
I was out of D.C., so it was good.
That's right. I was back in North Carolina. So
you serve on the House Ways and Means Committee overseeing a portion of this investigation. It appears that Republicans, even those that have been on the fence, are warming to the idea of allowing the inquiry to go forward just based on the volume of evidence that has been uncovered. Is that a correct assessment?
It is. And Tony, the real difference, just so people understand what the impeachment versus the inquiry is, it gives us certain legal capabilities for subpoena efforts that can't be, if we have now an inquiry by the entire House that's voted for something, giving a subpoena to people at the DOJ, they can't turn it down. It's going to be a much greater force to them that they have to answer it and come back and speak to the entire House, come back before the committees of jurisdiction and answer the real questions that are needed to be answered.
So in part, that has not happened because some of these requests for information have just been ignored or blocked. Is that correct?
That is correct. And this, if we go through and vote on the inquiry and we can move forward, well, again, just remember, Tony, when Pelosi threw this through on President Trump twice, it had no judicial proceedings. Remember, our founders wanted impeachment to be a grave, grave offense, not anything to be tossed around just because of political partisanship. So we're actually trying as Republicans to do it the right way. and we're bringing it forth. It's a legal proceeding. It's something now that we get an inquiry from the House. We can proceed with a lot more legitimacy than what Pelosi did.
What is your sense when you consider your colleague? I mean, you don't have much, no Democrat's going to support this. So you're going to have unanimous almost. You might be able to lose one vote, maybe two among Republicans. Where do you think you stand?
You know, Tony, it's almost hard to guess these days because sometimes we seem to be our own worst enemy. And some of the Republicans that are voting the way that they're voting. I hope that they'll at least vote for an inquiry, that we can agree to establish to look into these very mind-boggling findings that we've had so far, to push it to a legal determination that we can actually do something. Again, not as they say, putting the cart before the horse, but sure, everything sure leads to the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, Biden is compromised.
So I'm going to ask you this, Congressman Murphy. You've been a part of these investigations. You'll be a part of this. Tell us why you think this needs to move forward at this time as it has been presented.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Tony, because now that Hunter Biden's sweet plea deal was thrown out by a judge, thank God, this was showing that the DOJ was not really serious about what Hunter Biden's crimes were, that he should be, honestly, if you and I had done things, in jail. But this is Hunter Biden. And the Democrats are screaming, well, that's Hunter Biden, that's his son, that's all we need to worry about. The true connection is that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden have absolute connectivity in their business dealings. Joe Biden knew about them. Joe Biden received money in compensation with Hunter Biden's business dealings. We know that Hunter Biden created, with his brother, over 20 shell companies that had absolutely no purpose other than to receive money from nefarious places such as China, Ukraine, Russia. And these were funneled. Again, we've also found out that President Biden had multiple alias email addresses that he was connecting and discussing with Hunter Biden's associates. The circle will be complete, and it will show that money that Hunter Biden got, remember, the big guy got 10%. Joe Biden got $40,000. We will show completely that there is a full circle showing that Joe Biden sold his vice presidency, and that's treasonous in the eyes. It should be treasonous in the eyes of the American people.
Dr. Murphy, last week the president angrily dismissed claims of his involvement as "quote unquote" lies. Now, I've not been tracking this like you, but as I've seen, there's close to 24 times that Joe Biden has been caught lying to the American people about this.
Well, that's 24 just about this particular issue, Tony. Good Lord, you remember that great Sam Donaldson interview? I love that interview when Biden was caught lying about his law school and all these other things. He's lying point blank. Number one, he said he didn't know anything about his business dealings. That's an absolute lie. Absolutely. And then the fact that he profited from basically extorting money from Burisma, extorting money from China, the part of the Chinese Communist Party. You wonder why he's been so soft on China. Mm-hmm. And so we will show this. And the fact that Joe Biden is saying lies does not surprise me in the least.
You know, that's what concerns me most about this, Dr. Murphy, is how this could possibly affect policy positions that we've taken against our foreign adversaries like China.
Sure. Absolutely. And, China's our greatest adversary, and I'll even say enemy today. And President Biden has been so soft on this, on China during his entire administration. It begs the question, why?
Yeah.
And I think the question will be answered when we see the money connection.
Well, we will be tracking this very, very closely. Congressman Greg Murphy, always great to see you, and thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Tony. God bless.
All right. Merry Christmas. All right. Coming up next, did the war in Gaza spark the unprecedented wave of anti-Semitism on U.S. college campuses? Or did it simply expose it? Stay tuned for more Washington Watch. We're going to talk with Ira Stoll after the break on that very topic.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. In Pakistan, Asif Pervez is on death row for allegedly sending a blasphemous text message. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Well, after the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT embarrassed themselves in congressional testimony last week with evasive answers about students calling for the genocide of Jews, the fallout has been swift, and I would say thankfully. The Penn president resigned on Saturday, and pressure is mounting for the Harvard president, Claudine Gay, to do the same. But what led to this something that has been at work under the kind of festering on these college campuses for a long time? Did October 7th spark it, or did it simply expose it, this war in Gaza? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Ira Stoll, editor of futureofcapitalism.com and a graduate of Harvard University. For 4 years, he was managing editor of Harvard's Education Next, and he attributes anti-Semitism at Harvard as among the reasons he left the institution. He is also, I should say, the author of one of my favorite books on Samuel Adams, who was also a graduate of Harvard. Ira, welcome to Washington Watch.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Before we discuss what you experienced at Harvard and answering this question, is this simply exposing or did it spark what we've seen happening across the country? Tell us your reaction first to congressional testimony from the presidents of these Ivy League institutions last week.
I thought the testimony at the hearing was quite disappointing. It was clear they'd been briefed ahead of time by lawyers, and they had these binders. They had a few sentences of talking points that they used to respond to virtually every question. And they didn't seem to respect the congressmen who were asking them the questions. They seemed almost annoyed to have to be there, as if they were more important than the Congress people.
Now, Ira, you've been writing about this recently, and you said, look, you can replace the president of, in particular in Harvard, but it's going to take more than that. So was what we've seen happening, what we've witnessed on college campuses across the United States, and I guess I'm going to focus on the United States, since the war in Gaza began, did that spark that anti-Semitism, or did it simply expose it?
Well, these campuses, particularly the so-called elite ones, have such a profound ideological tilt. And that was one of the things that the congressmen were asking the presidents about. They were asking about data about the ideological balance of the faculty members. And studies have shown that, maybe 1 to 5% or maybe 10% of the Harvard faculty or even students are conservative or Republican, and the rest are far left, progressive, liberal. You look at campaign contributions, you can survey them and ask them, and the students are the same way. And so it's just this far left atmosphere, and we've seen that spill over into harsh anti-Israel views, and to the point of like sympathizing with the horrible terrorist attacks of October 7th. And it's been building for a long time. I think the students at these colleges are getting the bad ideas from the grown-ups, from the faculty members. And so the protests that broke out, or the statements, the absurd statements we saw after October 7th, blaming Israelis for their own basically murder and rape and beheading. The Harvard student organizations put out this statement that was all Israel's fault. And, there were professors, Harvard tenured professors, speaking at their rallies. And if you go to the events that the university is staging to try to put this in academic context, you're getting the same message about so-called settler colonialism, even though the Israelis, the Jews have been in that land, as your listeners and viewers know, since biblical times. It's just very disheartening and disappointing, and it's been building for a long time.
So Ira, how can our universities find their way forward on this topic? Is it hopeless? Is there going to be a course correction? What needs to be done?
Well, I'm a big believer in markets, and luckily, the United States has a fairly robust competitive market for higher education. So we've seen after October 7th a statement, there was a joint statement from Yeshiva University and Notre Dame saying, and Brandeis saying, we stand with Israel. And Hillsdale College had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying, basically, Jewish families, your children are safe here. So I think people who care about this stuff may look elsewhere than the Ivy League. They may go to the South, to public colleges and universities. And also, there are constituencies applying pressure, alumni, Congress. Right. The faculty don't want any outside pressure. They don't want any grown-up supervision at all. But at some point, trustees and government are going to have to assert themselves, or we'll just see these trends continue.
Well, I think you're right. There's different levels. The first level, I think, is the free markets, and I think people should respond, because I think this is a tip of the iceberg of the ideological descent of higher education, and so we should go send our kids elsewhere. Ira, we're out of time, but always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a Merry Christmas.
Our pleasure. Happy Hanukkah to you.
Yes. All right, folks, don't go away. Coming back with more Washington Watch right after this.
The world is hurting. Streets are filled with crime. Families are broken. Sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these sage cons yourself, go to frc.org/sagecon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/sagecon, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us. The website, tonyperkins.com. And by the way, let me give you that Capitol switchboard number again because you're going to need it this week. It's going to be a busy week as Congress tries to wrap up business. 202-224-3121. We're going to talk here in a moment about the National Defense Authorization Act. The conference committee report came back last week, stripping out most of the conservative provisions put in this past summer by the House, including the issue of facilitating or providing transportation, what they call abortion travel, for members of the military. Again, it intertwines or intertangles Americans in the funding of abortion. That was taken out, as well as surgeries, transgender surgeries. That was taken out. Republicans were accused of politicizing the NDAA when they were simply trying to bring it back to where it was before. The Biden administration came in and unilaterally put all of these crazy things in there. So, but before I do that, we do have some folks, we have some of our team members standing by to take your calls as we move toward the end of the year. This is when nonprofits like ourselves here at the Family Research Council, which is the sponsor of Washington Watch, we receive no government money. We're funded strictly by folks like you across this country who care about this country and want to know what's going on. And that's why we bring you newsmakers directly, unfiltered by the legacy media, with clear action items on what you can do to make a difference. Our republic, as I say frequently, was not made for spectators, it was made for participants. And we need you to be on the field protecting our republic. So we have some friends that have put forward a challenge match, and your gift will be doubled between now and December 31st. So please partner with us, and if you'd like to do so, in fact, for any gift over $30, we'll send you our new Stand on the Word journal to take advantage of this limited time opportunity. Give one of our team members a call, 800-225-4008. They're standing by, waiting for you to call them and say, Merry Christmas. 800-225-4008. Well, last week on Washington Watch, I discussed at length the National Defense Authorization Act and how its current version, as I said earlier, waters down the terrific language that the House put in back in July. Now, there's opposition building to the NDAA in the House, but it's not so much over those issues I just mentioned as it is extending the authorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. And this has garnered a lot of opposition. In fact, some reports are saying that at least 50, as of right now, are opposed as Republicans. Now, Section 702 opens the door for warrantless backdoor searches of Americans' electronic communications. Now, why has such important legislation been tagged and added to the annual must-pass NDAA after we work through the NDA and all of a sudden this language is here? What is it? What does the FISA provisions do? How have they been misused, and can they be fixed? Joining me to discuss this is Ken Kulkowski, a former senior counsel in the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice and a former special counsel in the White House's Office of Management and Budget. He has also litigated constitutional cases in the U.S. Supreme Court. Ken, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
So, Ken, walk us through, number one, the history of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, and how it came about.
Well, this all started when, with evolving technologies, the issue is that the Constitution draws a distinction between law enforcement on one side and military, and which includes intelligence activities on the other. It's a distinction between law enforcement and national security. Law enforcement is the domain of domestic policy. National security, whether it's military or whether it's diplomacy or whether that's the CIA, all of that belongs in the realm of foreign policy. And that balances the fact that on one hand, the framers of our Constitution and, for 200 years, statesmen from every political party and in all branches of government have understood that the world is a dangerous place. It's a broken place. But at the same time, domestically, we need a free society, one where the presumption is of liberty, where we're maximizing the rights and liberties of American citizens. And so FISA strikes a balance there in terms of, well, what about when you have national security needs, but they take place on U.S. soil? Like what happens if you have a foreigner who is on U.S. soil, whether it's a student visa or they're a guest or they claim to be on vacation or whatever. So it's a matter of how we bring these very serious surveillance capabilities and exercise them on U.S. soil in a way that does not cross the lines of constitutional protection that American citizens have.
So, this has become complicated, as you mentioned, because of technology. But I think this goes back to 1978 when FISA was first approved. But Section 702, again, looking to technology, kind of opens a back door for searches of Americans. So, how has that jeopardized this Fourth Amendment against search and seizure?
Well, recent studies, as lawmakers have looked into this, they found out that there have been literally hundreds of thousands, not hundreds or thousands, but hundreds of thousands of FISA search warrants that have been executed on Americans without a search warrant. And that has set off alarms all over, it really on both sides of the aisle, because the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, part of our Bill of Rights, was to do away with the British practice of what are called general warrants, meaning general search warrants. And that was just that if the government was unhappy with someone in Great Britain, they could just say, go search that guy's house until you find evidence of a crime. And there were specific instances of abuses in the mid-1700s where this was all over the radar screen of the framers of our Constitution. And so that is why they put in the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution a requirement that that search warrants must only be issued if people can swear out specific facts showing probable cause that executing that warrant would unveil evidence of a crime. And it had to be specific rather than general. It had to be specific in what the crime was and what sort of stuff they're looking for precisely. And that if you couldn't get a warrant, if law enforcement could not swear those things out before a judge and get him to sign a warrant, then you could not invade that person's house or papers or search their person and invade their privacy. So it's a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution.
So, Ken, what is happening under Section 702 of FISA, if I'm not mistaken, is that technology...
Yeah, well, yes, go ahead, please.
Technology is allowing the government to comb through this data without a warrant and without the individuals actually knowing that the government is looking at it. And if they happen to find something, then they can act upon it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because otherwise, under the normal criminal justice system, if government agents seize information about you that they couldn't have gotten without a warrant, that information cannot be used against you in court. So, I mean, this is a robust right. And in fact, and that's where we see the proposed reforms that are being recommended and debated right now as to whether to keep FISA the way it is, whether to reform it a little bit, tinkering around the edges with it, or as a bipartisan group of lawmakers voted out just in the past few days, including some of the most conservative members of Congress teaming up, believe it or not, with some of the most liberal members in Congress, seeking to bring these constitutional protections into the FISA process.
So FISA actually does have a very important national security component when it's utilized under the restrictions that we're talking about protecting American citizens, correct? Given what's happening internationally with terrorism and the threats to the United States?
Yes, absolutely. The world's a dangerous place. There's sin in the world. Of course, we talk about that all the time on your show. So especially for people with a biblical worldview, but also just patriotic Americans, who might not even be of a particular faith. It's just an understanding that the world is a dangerous place. And so we do need tools to be able to protect Americans.
We just need them to be used properly. And what's being proposed are guidelines, restrictions that bring this back, as I understand it, to its initial purpose and function, which protects the fundamental rights of Americans. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding, Tony. Yes, we're talking about a package of reforms that was just voted out of the House Judiciary Committee by a vote of 35-2. I mean, championed by a great American and a great friend of this show, Chairman Jim Jordan of Ohio, but with liberal Democrats joining on to this package as well. Only 2 members, both of them Democrats, voted against the reforms. Aside from that, Republicans and Democrats all voted for this, which, among other things, would require a search warrant for 702 searches, with a couple exceptions, like if there is an imminent threat of death or bodily harm, or if there's an imminent threat of like computer spyware, like whether it's Iranian or whatever malware in a computer system, that you have a couple escape valves there to be able to act in urgent emergencies. But if it's not an urgent emergency, then the cops need to take it to a judge, tell them what they've got, and be able to swear to those facts. And then a judge makes a decision as to whether there is probable cause that this would actually uncover evidence of a crime, as the Constitution commands.
All right, so Ken Kulkowski, that brings us to the NDAA and this language being attached to the NDAA. Now, my understanding is it's been attached. It's an extension that carries it over into the spring, because there was a sense there might not be enough time to get this accomplished in the standalone bill that you just talked about by the end of the year, which the current authorization expires on. So does the language in the NDAA do anything more than just extend this for a few months?
Well, in my understanding is that this is a fluid and evolving situation right now. I mean, I know that the bill text is out, but what I've heard as recently as the past 2 hours is that before the NDAA comes to a vote, that there could even be the proponents of different types of reforms having the chance to argue it out, and that there might be a last-minute modification of the language possibly to incorporate these reforms. And I'm told that there are lawmakers pushing hard to make that happen, because if this is going to be reauthorized, that they want to do it right.
Well, I would sense that I would think that that probably has to happen, given the opposition that is present to a plain reauthorization of this language, even if it's an extension just for a few more months, because of the abuses that have, how it's been abused by the Biden administration.
That's right. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of search warrants conducted by the federal government against American citizens, where no judge ever said that there was probable cause, that it would show an indicator of a crime. And there's different reform packages out there, but I think for those who support Chairman Jordan's reforms, they point out that even under some of these other reforms, the government could still search through Wi-Fi if you're on a public Wi-Fi network. So if someone goes to Starbucks or McDonald's or a hotel and they are on a Wi-Fi network that's not their own private home network, that even then you are outside the protections of this warrant requirement. And of course, so many of your listeners, as they go through about their daily lives, I mean, how often are they in places where they're accessing public Wi-Fi?
Well, and
the idea would be you could lose your protections in a situation like that.
Well, wasn't this in part what they used to go after President Trump when he was a candidate?
You know, when the facts are still coming out on that, but we have seen alarming abuses from several years ago through stories that we've all, of course, heard them, and we've gone through the election campaign, and now, of course, they're being discussed even again about warrantless searches that were going on from individuals who worked in the Trump administration or on the former president's campaign.
Yeah, I just think we've got to be very, very careful in what type of power we give to our government. And these fundamental rights that our founders recognized, they need to be protected at all costs because they're there for a reason. Ken Klukowski, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you. Merry Christmas.
Thanks so much, Tony. Merry Christmas to you.
All right, folks, another action item for you. I do think it's necessary. I've had the conversations with the Intelligence Committee chairman and the speaker about this. I do think there's a national security concern here, but it needs very, very, very bright lines of guidance, because I do not trust this federal government at all. All right, folks, we're out of time for today, but Lord willing, we'll be back again tomorrow, and I hope you will as well. Until then, I leave you with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything that you can do, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.